Was the now some international news. Though the financial crisis is biting hard in Europe, the European Commission has scaled up its funding to the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries from 22 billion euros to 32 billion euros. The package, which is 10 billion euros more than the previous envelope of 22 billion euros, will cover the period 2014 to 2020. Critics say 32 billion euros for an organization like the ACP Group, which is made up of 80 countries, is small and will hardly make the impact expected, though it is an aid. Edward Nyaku reports.
It is 37 years since the ACP was formed. Though young, its relationship with Europe goes back to the era when slavery and colonialism was in vogue. That is over 2 centuries ago. However, the bond of ties among these countries saw the formation of ACP under Georgetown Agreement in Guyana in 1975. Being the largest coalition of developing countries, the ACP has over the past 3 decades been defined by its relationship with the EU, all with the aim of promoting trade. The latest funding of 32 billion euro, when shared among the 80 countries, will mean each country will receive 400 million euro. That is provided it to be shared equally, because there are several criteria the EU uses in doling out aid. Dubbed the 11th European Development Fund, EDF, the EU said this fund will be subject to new principles when it's been given out to support budget of recipient countries. These include how ACP countries have been able to make use of aid in relationship to budgets and aligning them to the needs of the country. The European Commissioner in charge of development, Andris Spielberg, said 2020 will be a significant year for ACP countries because the Cotonou Agreement, which is the framework of trade relations between the EU and ACP group, will expire.
I would like to briefly mention the €1 billion Development Goals Initiative. The Vulnerability Flex mechanisms that help to reduce the financing gaps caused by the global economic and financial crisis. Peace Facility is €1 billion in funding from the European Development Fund.
Secretary General of the ACP Group, Dr. Mohamed Ibn Chamba, said while the group look forward to the 32 billion euro fund, it is also concerned about how it can help in meeting the development aspirations of the recipient countries.
We will be dialoguing with our EU partners, not only on the performance of the EDF-10, but also on the quantum and quality of development assistance going forward.
From the Malabo summit, it was clear that the way to go in terms of development is not dependent upon aid, such as the 11th EDF, but trade among the ACP countries. However, records from the World Trade Organization shows that trade is as low as 3%, and these the delegates say it needs to be scaled up to about 10% within the next decade. Edward Nyaku, reporting for GTV News.
NEH. Ghana is likely to occupy the topmost job at the World Trade Organization WTO in Geneva from April next year. This follows the support that has been garnered from delegates that attended the African, Caribbean and Pacific Summit in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. The ambassador of Vanuatu to the European Union in Brussels, Mr. Mickey Roy, says the candidature of Mr. Alan Kyerematen for the WTO post, if endorsed by the 157-member organization, will go a long way to help developing nations when it comes to trade negotiations.
The WTO is made up of 157 countries, and its primary objective is to guarantee that trade among nations is done freely and as predictable as possible. Simply put, it can be referred to as an organization for trade opening, trade negotiations, and providing platforms for member states to sort out trade challenges they face with each other. It was born out of the 1986-1994 negotiations called the Uruguay Round and earlier negotiations under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT. Headquartered in Geneva with 640 staff and with an annual budget of 196 million Swiss francs, the WTO appoints its Director General on 4-year term basis, renewable ones. The current Director General, Pascal Lamy, who is from France, took office in 2009 and was stepped down in April 2013. However, since regional consideration is a key factor coupled with competence, the African Union nominated a coordinator at the Africa Trade Policy Center at the Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, in Ethiopia, Mr. Alan Kyerematen, as its choice. Also of critical importance, support from a candidate home government, which President Mahama eloquently did at the ACP conference in Malabo. However, Africa can hardly get a nod for its candidate for the WTO Director General's post without the backing of other regional groupings like the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group, ACP. Therefore, it was not out of place to hear Vanuatu's ambassador to the EU, Mr. Roy Miki, urging his colleagues from the Pacific and the Caribbean to support Ghana's candidate, Mr. Alan Kyerematen.
While we have rallied our support to support one credible candidate from Ghana, from the Republic of Ghana, to the post of the next Director General of WTO, is basically because Ghana is, of course, as you know, one of the major forces now be an economic success in the African Union and in the African continent. That when the trade minister of HCP met in October in Brussels, there was a resolution that I proposed, Vanuatu proposed, that HCP should stand together in unity and solidarity to support the credible candidate from HCP.
The ACP bloc consists of 80 countries, a number that is more than half of the WTO's membership of 157. Therefore, if he is able to secure this, he could be well on his way to securing the top job. Mr. Alan Kyerematen explains why he's bidding for the WTO post.
I have more or less had a lot of experience as a negotiator at the bilateral level, at the regional level, and also at the multilateral level. I think that this experience will be very useful as the next Director General of the WTO if I'm appointed. But I would also be coming to this job with significant management experience, both in the private sector and also in international organizations.
Though the Doha round of talks has stalled for about 10 years now, the relevance of the WTO cannot be overlooked. And if the only African nominee is approved by the board of the WTO, it is expected that Mr. Alan Kyerematen will ensure that the interests of the developing nations is given the attention it deserves. Edward Nyakun, reporting for GTV News.